I had barely stepped into the living room when Livia's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Why don't you just disappear?" she screamed, eyes flashing, her hands trembling with anger. My stomach sank. My heart caught somewhere between disbelief and shock. I froze in place, clutching the edge of my bag, feeling the weight of every unsaid word from years of being overlooked pressing down on me. Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't even open his mouth. He simply nodded along, a silent endorsement that stung far worse than any shouted accusation. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in as if conspiring with them both, erasing me in real time. I searched for any hint of hesitation, any sign that he might intervene, but there was none. The betrayal hit me harder than the words themselves. I remembered the countless times I had tried to assert myself in this family, only to be brushed aside, my voice swallowed by louder opinions or hurried dismissals. And now, at 57, the pattern had not changed. Livia's fury, Nathan's quiet agreement, the silent spectatorship of the people who should have loved me unconditionally, it all combined into a familiar ache I had carried for decades. For a long moment, I considered speaking, defending myself, letting the frustration boil into an eruption that might finally make them hear me. But the truth was, no words would pierce their conviction. They had already decided the story, and my side had no place in it. I exhaled slowly, a measured breath that felt like reclaiming the smallest piece of control. I turned without a word, walked toward the guest room they had reluctantly kept for me, my movements deliberate and quiet. I packed only what I could carry in a single bag, no mementos, no letters, nothing sentimental. Each item was practical, each step away a silent statement that I would not argue. Not now. Not ever again for their acknowledgement. I closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing like the first note in a new rhythm of life, a life I would have to navigate alone, at least for now. The air in the hallway felt heavy but strangely liberating, and with my bag over my shoulder, I stepped toward the threshold that would lead me away from the weight of their judgments. I moved through the house with quiet precision. Each item I packed a small assertion of control in the midst of chaos I hadn't caused. My hands worked automatically, selecting only what I needed: a few changes of clothes, my laptop, essential documents, nothing sentimental, nothing that could tie me to a place that had long treated me as invisible. I didn't pause, didn't linger by the photos on the wall or the awards gathering dust on the shelves. They had never noticed them before, and they certainly wouldn't notice now. As I zipped the bag closed, a familiar ache rose in my chest. Decades of being dismissed, of watching birthdays pass without acknowledgement, of quietly contributing to the family while receiving little more than polite nods in return, pressed against me. I remembered the milestones I had missed, the achievements no one had celebrated with me, the small victories I had accomplished in silence, unnoticed. It was all a pattern I had recognized too late, the pattern that led me here, moving away with nothing but a bag and the faintest trace of defiance. I lingered for a moment in the doorway of the room that had been reluctantly set aside for me, a space I had rarely called my own. The thought of returning to a life where my worth was measured only by what others tolerated, or worse, ignored, tightened in my chest. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the house settle behind me. With deliberate steps, I moved toward the front door, feeling the coolness of the hardwood beneath my shoes, the emptiness of a home that had never truly welcomed me. I reached for the doorknob, hand steady, and opened it, stepping into the street where my past no longer defined the measure of my life. The city awaited, indifferent and vast, and I began walking toward the uncertain freedom that lay ahead. The streetlights blurred against the damp sidewalks as I walked, my bag heavy on one shoulder, the other hand stuffed deep in my coat pocket. The city hummed around me, indifferent to my presence, and for the first time in years, that indifference felt like a kind of freedom. I kept my pace steady, counting the steps to the bus station, calculating how long it would take to reach the edge of town where a small motel might offer a room. Cash was scarce, barely enough to cover a night's stay and a modest meal. I ducked into a corner store and bought a granola bar and a bottle of water, my hands careful, deliberate. I balanced the coins in my palm, noting the exact amount I had left. At 57, the city felt larger, less forgiving. Yet I walked it with a resolve I hadn't felt in decades. The bus arrived late, the driver nodding but not asking questions, and I slid onto a worn seat, backpack between my legs. The motion of the vehicle and the blur of streetlights offered a strange comfort. No one knew who I was. No one expected anything from me. I could simply exist, unobserved, unjudged, and for now, that was enough. I got off several stops later, walking past shuttered shops and the hum of distant traffic. My steps carried me toward a small neon-lit motel, the kind of place that wouldn't question me, that didn't care about my past or my family. The sign flickered, but the door opened without resistance. A key exchanged for cash. I climbed the narrow stairs and placed my bag on the bed, feeling the first real sense of control in a long time. For the first evening, the world beyond my motel room could wait. I was alone, but I was moving, and that alone was a beginning. I sank onto the edge of the bed, letting the quiet settle around me, already planning what I would do next. The next morning, I woke with a sense of quiet determination. I poured a cup of coffee from the motel's single-serve machine and set up my laptop on the small desk. It had been years since I last touched my old tutoring profiles, but now they felt like a lifeline rather than a relic of the past. I opened each account carefully, updating credentials, revising descriptions, and polishing my teaching philosophy. I wrote with precision, listing experience I had gained over decades test prep, writing support, study planning, emphasizing reliability, patience, and insight. By late morning, the first notifications began to trickle in. A parent asking if I could help their high schooler with an SAT practice test. Another reaching out for adult literacy guidance. Each message felt like a confirmation that the world beyond my family still held value for me, that there were people willing to recognize my skills and effort. I responded carefully, setting times, clarifying rates, and reading every reply with a growing sense of pride. As I scheduled the first session, a small smile broke across my face. For the first time in decades, I wasn't negotiating for attention or approval. I was negotiating for the work itself, for the knowledge and support I could provide. My age, my past disappointments, the years of invisibility, they meant nothing here. The clients didn't know my family, didn't care about the resentment I carried. They simply needed guidance, and I was prepared to give it. I spent the afternoon reviewing lesson plans I had saved for years, adjusting materials, and preparing notes. Each click and keystroke was a reminder that I was building something for myself, not for anyone else. By evening, I had scheduled 3 sessions for the following week, each confirmation a quiet victory, proof that I could reclaim authority over my own life. Sitting back on the motel bed, I felt a shift in the air around me. The small victories were subtle, but they carried weight. For the first time in years, I was acknowledged for my work, my skill, and my presence, not by family, not by obligation, but by people who recognized what I offered. I opened my notebook and began jotting down a plan for the week ahead, each line a step toward reclaiming my life and my confidence, and the quiet satisfaction in my chest grew steadily as I considered what I could accomplish next. It was late in the evening when I stumbled across it, a link forwarded from one of my former students. I hesitated before clicking, my fingers frozen over the trackpad. The website that opened made my chest tighten instantly. Livia's name was stamped across the top, branding it as her own. I scrolled down, and my eyes widened in disbelief. Every lesson plan, every diagnostic rubric, every carefully crafted diagram I had spent years developing there it was, presented as if she had created it. I leaned back in the chair, stunned. I could feel a rush of anger boiling beneath the calm surface I had cultivated, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't a moment for shouting or confrontation. I had to see it clearly, understand the full extent of what had been taken from me. Each page I examined confirmed the truth my work, my effort, my intellectual property had been stolen and claimed as someone else's. The initial shock gave way to a precise clarity. This was no accident. Livia had deliberately erased my contributions while keeping her image intact. The pattern of being overlooked and dismissed by my family had been amplified here into something tangible and public. I closed my laptop for a moment, letting the silence of the motel room fill the space around me. Anger was one thing, but action required strategy. Legal action could restore recognition, but it could also drag me into unnecessary drama, and I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I needed proof, documentation, and a plan that gave me control. Every time-stamped draft, every saved email, every curriculum file I still had could serve as evidence. The weight of the situation settled into a determined resolve. I would reclaim what was mine, and I would do it on my terms, without letting them dictate the pace or tone. I reopened the laptop, methodically organizing my files and preparing the first steps of a response that would be measured, deliberate, and undeniable. I would not rush into confrontation, but I would not ignore the theft either. By the time the streetlights flickered outside, I had mapped out the initial plan. The first move would set everything into motion, and I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The following morning, I called Margot, an attorney specializing in intellectual property, and explained the situation with measured words. I left nothing to emotion. I described facts, dates, and evidence with precision. She listened carefully, taking notes, asking the right questions, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of partnership rather than isolation. I spent the rest of the morning gathering everything I had stored over the years: drafts of lesson plans, email exchanges with former clients, old feedback forms, and every time-stamped file I could find. Each document I laid out felt like a thread in a tapestry of my work, and seeing them together reminded me of the value I had created long before Livia had attempted to claim it. Margot advised me to organize the evidence in chronological order, to establish a clear pattern of ownership. I worked methodically, naming folders, creating backups, annotating drafts to highlight the evolution of my ideas. My anger simmered beneath the surface, but I refused to let it dictate my actions. I needed control, clarity, and credibility, and every keystroke brought me closer to both. By afternoon, I had prepared a packet to share with her for review, each page carefully marked, each timestamp verified. The process itself felt empowering. I was transforming years of frustration into a tangible, unassailable record. Margot confirmed the strategy: notify the relevant platforms, secure legal recognition, and prepare for the public documentation if necessary. I leaned back in the motel chair and looked at the neatly arranged folders on the desk. For the first time since leaving home, I felt the smallest flicker of confidence. I wasn't reacting impulsively. I was responding strategically. The situation was serious, but I had a plan. and I knew exactly how to execute it. Closing the laptop, I allowed myself a single deep breath. The world would eventually see the evidence, whether they did immediately or not. The truth was ready, documented, and undeniable. I slid the folders into my bag, feeling the weight of purpose settle into my chest, and began plotting the next step in reclaiming everything that had been stolen from me. By midweek, I had everything prepared. Margot had reviewed the documents and confirmed that my claim was watertight timestamps, drafts, client feedback, and curriculum revisions all clearly proved ownership. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to former clients, professional contacts, and the platforms hosting my materials. The tone was deliberate, factual, composed, unflinching. I included the evidence, attached screenshots and PDF files, and explained the situation clearly. I didn't vent. I didn't accuse. I simply stated the truth and provided proof. Within hours, the responses started coming. Messages of support flooded in, former students, parents, and colleagues all expressing shock and disbelief, affirming that they recognized my work and valued my contributions. The reassurance was quiet but profound. These were people who had no reason to act beyond what they knew to be true. Seeing their validation strengthened something in me that had been dormant for years. Next, I turned to social media. I uploaded a careful, detailed post showing side-by-side comparisons of my original work and Livia's materials. Screenshots, timestamps, annotations all presented plainly. Within the day, it was being shared across professional groups and education forums. Comments appeared rapidly. People called out the plagiarism, praised the clarity of my evidence, and confirmed my credibility. The first ripple of tension came through quickly. Livia's posts defending herself were met with skepticism, and her carefully curated persona began to unravel online. Her credibility slipped with each passing hour, while mine strengthened. For the first time in decades, the truth felt tangible, unstoppable, and public. I realized that the recognition I had sought for so long was not just personal. It was now visible, undeniable. Sitting back, I allowed myself a brief smile, tasting satisfaction that wasn't loud or flashy, but precise and complete. This was justice in its quietest, most effective form, undeniable, verifiable. And finally, mine. The work I had built, the reputation I had nurtured, could no longer be stolen. I closed the laptop and stretched, feeling the weight of empowerment settle over me. The next step was inevitable. My family would notice, and when they did, everything would change. The first call came early. A soft chime from my phone that I almost ignored. Nathan's name appeared on the screen, and I paused before answering. When I finally picked up, his voice was cautious, strained, unlike the confident tone I was used to. "Mom, things have gotten complicated. Livia. He trailed off, as if struggling to find the right words. I didn't interrupt. I let him stumble through the sentences, the excuses, the half-apologies that never fully formed. Every word reminded me of the years I had been dismissed, every hesitation a reflection of the times I had been erased. I listened quietly, keeping my voice even when he shifted from concern to pleading. Soon, Livia's voice joined the call, sharp and anxious. She tried to assert control, to twist the narrative, but the power had shifted. I remained calm, letting them reveal the extent of the crisis themselves. Their carefully constructed facade had fractured, and it was no longer my responsibility to repair it. I wasn't their counselor, their moderator, or their shield. I had spent decades maintaining composure while they made me the scapegoat. Now, their mistakes were theirs alone. I spoke only once, measured and clear. I have documented everything. I have communicated the truth to every relevant party. I am not fixing what you chose to break. My words hung between us, heavy, but steady. I didn't soften the edges, and I didn't apologize. There was no room for manipulation, no space for old patterns to reassert themselves. The silence on the line that followed was telling. They realized that I would not bend, would not be the instrument of their redemption. Their panic was subtle but unmistakable. The reversal of power was complete. I hung up, and the room felt lighter, the tension I had carried for years slowly releasing. I sank into the chair and looked at the folder of evidence still neatly stacked on the desk. Every file, every timestamp, every email was proof of my autonomy, my skill, and my resilience. For the first time, I felt the quiet satisfaction of moral victory, dignity intact, boundaries enforced, and the certainty that I no longer needed their acknowledgement to validate my worth. I turned back to the calendar and began plotting the next steps for my work, knowing the future was mine to shape without interference. By the time the week had ended, I had begun establishing a small scholarship fund in my grandmother's name, designed to help students who struggled silently the way I had once done. I drafted the application process, set modest criteria, and sent notices to local schools and community centers. It was a quiet start, but deliberate, and it carried a weight I had not felt in years. Each student who would benefit from the program would carry a piece of the care and attention I had once given so freely, now preserved and recognized. I continued tutoring, scheduling sessions with high schoolers preparing for exams and adult learners working toward their GEDs. The work was steady, the rewards subtle but genuine. Each completed session, each thank you note, and each incremental improvement reminded me that my efforts mattered, independent of family validation. I had built something lasting from the fragments of my professional life, and it belonged entirely to me. In the evenings, I reviewed lesson plans, responded to client messages, and reflected on the months that had passed. The anger and resentment I had carried softened into clarity and resolve. I recognized the strength it had taken to leave a family that failed to see me, to rebuild in silence, and to assert ownership over my work and my life. Freedom was no longer an abstract concept. It was tangible, grounded in my choices, my discipline, and the boundaries I had enforced. I thought back to the countless moments when my contributions had been ignored, erased, or undervalued, and I realized that those losses had shaped this independence. They had forced me to find validation within myself, to measure my worth by the impact I could create rather than the approval I received. The lessons of resilience, patience, and strategic action had all coalesced into this moment of quiet empowerment. Sitting at my small desk, the scholarship documents beside me and tutoring notes arranged in neat stacks, I understood the depth of what I had reclaimed. My dignity, my agency, and my voice were intact, and I would continue building a life that no one could diminish. The horizon felt open, and the path forward was mine to define. With resolve, I opened my laptop once more, ready to plan the next steps of a life shaped entirely by my own hand.